OpenVidu Enterprise offers the best performance, improved media quality, and better scalability for high-demand environments. It supports using multiple media servers, specifically Currento and MediaSub, and high availability deployment option in AWS, which brings a lot of benefits for failure tolerance. MediaSub also includes multiple improvements for video conferencing apps. You can check more detailed information about MediaSub and OpenVidu in the documentation. In this video, we will explain how to deploy OpenVidu Enterprise with high availability step by step. You can see in this image what we are going to deploy. We provide a cloud formation so you don't need to worry about technical stuff, but more detailed information can be found in the documentation. You will have the most important documentation links in the description. Just to give a briefly summary, we're going to have two auto-scaling groups, one with the master nodes and another with media nodes. OpenVidu state will be saved in a Redis database, and all the requests to the OpenVidu REST API will go through a load balancer. On the other hand, media will pass through media nodes directly. Before starting the deployment, we need to have a fully qualified domain name ready to be used, a certificate for this fully qualified domain name, and an Elastic Stack deployed. To simplify the process, I will try to explain these three previous steps in this video. The first thing we need to focus is the certificate configuration for the domain name we're going to use. For this example, I've created a Let's Encrypt certificate and I will import it into AWS. But maybe your own case is a little bit different. Maybe you have your certificate already managed by AWS, or maybe the files you will import are different from the ones I am going to use. This will depend completely on the certificate authorization you have used. This is the domain we're going to use in our deployment, and this is the certificate associated with the domain name we're going to use. I've created these certificates before using Let's Encrypt. So I will import these files into AWS. We just need to go to the certificate manager, click into the import button, and then we just need to fill these parameters. Let's copy first the content of the private key. We can use any editor we have in our system. Let's paste the certificate private key. We will do the same with the certificate file. And again, we will do exactly the same process with the chain file. In my case, I don't need to use the full chain file, so we can ignore it. Click on Next. Click on Next, import, and there we go. Here we have our certificate imported into AWS. As we can see in this panel, this certificate expires in 89 days, and it is because it is a Let's Encrypt certificate. I will copy this ARN because we will need it for the OpenVidu deployment. So let's close all the certificate files and put it here, for example. The next thing we need to do before deploying OpenVidu is to have an Elasticsearch and a Kibana service deployed. It is better for OpenVidu stability to have an Elasticsearch and a Kibana configured externally, so we've decided in Enterprise with high availability to use this service as an external resource. I am going to deploy the Elasticsearch service managed by AWS, or OpenSearch. You can search it by both names in AWS. So let's click into the Create Domain button. In the domain name section, you can put whatever you want. We will use as deployment type the development and testing, version 7.10. We will use a small machine for the nodes and only one node. For this example, you can use whatever nodes you want. In the network, we will put public access and we also need to create a master user so OpenVidu can connect into it. So the master username we're going to use is elastic admin in this example. You can use also wherever you want. I will take note of these parameters in this file so I can remember. And let's also use a password like that, for example. Let's copy the password and paste it. There we go. In the access policy, we will select only use fine-grained access control, and that's it. Now we can just click into the create button, and we just need to wait some minutes to have the deployment ready. When the domain status is active, we will check if the deployment works just by testing the Kibana URL, for example. Let's click into it. And here we will put the credentials we've created before. The elastic admin and my secret 123. Click into the login button. And there we go. Kibana is loading. So Elasticsearch is working correctly. So now we will save both URLs to use it for the OpenVidu deployment. Let's save it here. Elasticsearch. And we will also put the port. It is necessary in the deployment to specify the port for the Elasticsearch domain. And we also need to define it for the Kibana URL. So let's also put the port. And there we go. Now we have everything prepared to deploy OpenVidu. So let's go into it. Go to the CloudFormation section of AWS and click into Create a Stack and with new resources. Then in this section, in the Amazon S3 URL, we need to put the URL which reference to the CloudFormation template of the version we're going to deploy, which is the 2.20.0 in this case. So let's get the URL and paste it there. Click on next. We will use this as a stack name. You can put whatever you want there. This is the OpenVidu Pro license, which you should have. And here we will put the domain name for the deployment. In the OpenVidu Pro cluster ID, we can put whatever we want. It's just to identify the data for this cluster in the Elasticsearch data. And OpenVidu secret, we didn't think about any secret, so I will think about a secret right now. I will put it here, my secret, copy and paste it. Now in the media server section, you can select MediaSoup or Currento depending on which server you want to use. And now we're going to configure the Elasticsearch configuration. First we're going to with the Elasticsearch URL, and now we're going with the Kibana URL. So copy, paste, and let's do the same with the Elasticsearch username and password. So copy the username and the password, which is here. Copy and paste. We will use these instances as SSH key name. Select whatever you want to use. I will choose this for me, and I will put as minimum master nodes. I will put 2 master nodes, and the side master nodes to 2. So 2 master nodes will run at the beginning. And I will do the same with the media nodes, 2 media nodes. These are the scale up and scale down percentage to scale up and scale down. So, and now we need to configure the ARN for the certificate. And after that, we just need to define the VPCs and subnets we want to use. I want to clarify a thing about the VPC and subnets configuration. You need to configure for OpenVidu public subnets instead of private subnets. This is very important because if you deploy into private subnets, EC2 instances will not have public IPs and then media servers will not be reachable. It is possible to deploy using private subnets? Yes, but this will require a different video to explain it. So be sure to use public subnets or just the default VPC, which provides public subnets by default in each region. Click on Next. Select the Preserve Successfully Provisioned resource, so if the stack fails, it will not delete the resources. Here you can check the parameters. There we go. And click into this check because this CloudFormation will create a role. And now we just need to wait for the stack to be deployed. When the stack is deployed, we need to create a domain name, the domain name we've used for this deployment, to point into this load balancer URL, so we can reach our deployment. So we use as a DNS administration GoDaddy, so I will define a CNAME register here, which will be pointing to this to the load balancer domain name, and here I will set up the domain name we've used for the deployment. Example Enterprise. So let's save it, and now we should have a CNAME domain pointing into the load balancer. Let's see if our domain name is configured correctly. You can use the terminal in Ubuntu and execute this command. And let's put as an argument the domain name, and we will see that the domain name is now pointing to the load balancer of the CloudFormation we've deployed, of the cluster. It is pointing to this load balancer URL. So to check if the application is working correctly, let's get the domain name, which is now pointing to the load balancer, and go into the inspector section. Here we can see that the Let's Encrypt certificate is configured correctly, and also we can see with the Let's Access into the inspector, we can see in the cluster section that both media nodes are correctly set up. Now let's see if the cluster is working correctly. For that we need to have Java, Maven and Git installed, because we will try a tutorial that uses this cluster, which is in this section inside of the OpenVidu Enterprise AWS and deploying an OpenVidu application. We can see an example that actually uses reconnection capabilities of the high availability deployment, but it is also possible to test the deployment with that tutorial. So I will just we've just cloned the repository. Now we enter into the project. With this command we build the project, Maven clean package. And now we're going to start the application with this command. In this command we have two arguments, OpenVidu URL and OpenVidu secret. So what we're going to do is to put in the OpenVidu URL the domain name of our cluster, which is exampleenterprise.openvidu.io, and in exampleenterprise.openvidu.io, and in OpenVidu secret we will use my secret, which is the password we are using for OpenVidu. So let's just execute the application. The application runs on port 5000. Let's go into that and let's create a session called session A. This is the tutorial example. Let's open another tab to see if both users can see each other. So let's click allow, and there we go. The session is working correctly and our cluster is working as it should. Let's check in the inspector section if the session is created correctly. Here we can see both connections created and the session entered into one media node. So let's leave the session. If we leave the session, we can see that the session only have one participant because we need to leave the other tab. There we go, leave, and now there is no session. Another way to check if the cluster is correctly deployed is to go to the instances section to the EC2 panel and see that we have 2 media nodes and 2 master nodes. This is the number of master nodes and media nodes we've specified. And also in the target groups, we can see that both master nodes are healthy. This is very important. Both master nodes should be in healthy state. Another thing is to check media nodes. So we can go to the auto-scaling group and go to the auto-scaling group from the media nodes and check in the instance management that both media nodes are in healthy state. And that's all. Hopefully you have right now OpenVidu Enterprise with high availability correctly deployed and ready to host all of your OpenVidu sessions. Have a nice day and happy coding!